My name is Nicole Kaniki. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Research and Innovation at U of T. Bit of a long word, but essentially what I do is I support researchers at the institution to embed equity, diversity, and inclusion, or EDI as I'll refer to it for the rest of the session now as well, into their research, into the research environment, to really create a culture that is inclusive and equitable. Because the reality is that we know we don't live in a world where research is objective and everything is fair. Bias and historical ways of thinking and ideology still seep very much into the work that we do today that impacts our research. And so that's why it's important as well for us to kind of think about how EDI impacts that, how a lack of equity, a lack of inclusion impacts the work that we do. But today's session, I'm really looking forward to this one because it's kind of more geared in the way of not specifically EDI, but more so looking at research programming. So a little bit of my background, you're going to kind of get to know quite a bit about me as we go on through the session. I'm going to take it way back. Born and raised in Cape Town, South Africa. I completed my undergrad in the US in Tennessee at Lee University in athletic training. Worked a bit as an athletic trainer in the States and then moved up to Canada in 2009 to start my graduate studies. Did my master's in kinesiology at the University of Western Ontario at the time, now Western University, and then stayed to finish my PhD in health and rehabilitation sciences, but specifically measurement and methods. So research design, data analysis, all of that kinds of stuff is my jam. Also, why you'll see in a lot of this work too, it's sort of the way that I think about research as well as on the larger scale. Because that's sort of a lot of the work that I did. My actual research was in sports medicine. So I did a lot of my work on platelet-rich plasma in the healing of Achilles tendon ruptures in individuals. So I did clinical trials in that, did hip arthroscopy research, shoulder research, type clinical trials. So that's a bit of my research background. So I very much came from a STEM field and STEM side of things. But then, and I guess this adds to, for me, why this session here is so personal and important, why I'm excited about it too. But when I was finishing off my graduate work, I'd already published, well, one of my papers was already published, so I did a monograph, so 3 papers for my PhD. One of them was already published, one of them was on its way, I think it was submitted as well already, but I was about 6 months away from defending my final thesis when my supervisor said to me, "Oh, you should just quit your PhD, why do you need it anyway?" And that really got me thinking that I've been working with the same supervisors for the past 7 years. I was finishing off my PhD, had all my papers that I needed to, I'd already published during my PhD as well. She had no desire to help me in a career whatsoever. I was about to be 6 months away from defending my thesis and having a PhD and being unemployed with no mentor no sponsor. I had a mentor, she was amazing. She's one of the best researchers in the field. And I learned so much. Everything I learned from her and the folks that I got to work with there. But one thing I definitely realized was that even though I was practically running her lab for her for the past 3 years as her full-time research assistant and her graduate student, and her office being on the other side of campus and her kind of visiting the clinic. And again, too, if you know much about clinical research, it's an everyday, all-day thing. There's graduate students, work-study students through all day long, so I was supervising them and kind of, making sure that the day-to-day runnings of the clinic was going well. All of that didn't matter. I was about to be without a job and with a PhD. And what I realized too is pretty typical of people who look like me. I was watching my counterparts that I was supporting on their thesis work, their publications, their work, go on to their next steps, their next role, get big references for med school or, their next postdocs or whatever it was. I didn't even know what a postdoc was, to be honest. First gen immigrant, didn't know much about what the research landscape looked like, what it took to really be a research professor. All I knew was I loved research. I loved what I was doing, but I had no idea where I was going. And so, in my sort of all of that, I realized too, I needed to do something. So it was 6 months to my defending my thesis. I decided to just look for a job at the university. So I applied for a staff position. I actually got a job as a research ethics officer, which I didn't know was going to set me on a path actually of where I am today. Anyway, I started as a research ethics officer a couple months after that. While I was finishing sort of working full-time there, defended my thesis and carried on working there. I worked as a research ethics officer for about a year and a half, and then went into research development officer, which is where I've been for about the past like 5 years before I came into this role that I'm currently in. If you know much about administration, research administration, I know sometimes researchers themselves who are doing the work don't know who is in the back end supporting a lot of that work. But research development offices, essentially, I supported grant programs. So any of the grant programs, so where applications, you wanted to apply for a grant externally or even internally sometimes, I would support the researchers, would do one-on-ones, I'd build the application for them, help develop the application for them, and then help them submit it. So I've been through the ringer. I've seen Canada Research Chairs, I've seen CIHR, I've seen NSERC, I've seen SHRCs, I've seen Ontario level grants, I've seen all types of grants that you can kind of think of. And I've learned a lot on the way. And so today's presentation is really sort of an accumulation of a lot of that knowledge that I want to be able to share with you. Because again, too, as I've learned working with researchers, there are some things you can get ready for that'll really prepare you to be more successful in grants, to be more successful sort of down the road in your career if you know and if you plan well for it. So I'm going to introduce to you today a tool that I've adopted from Western University when I was kind of working there before, that I want to share with you. I've kind of adopted it a little bit to suit kind of like, here today, but I do want to give credit and acknowledgement to the fact that Miriam Haywood at Western University and Aaron Huner developed this tool that I'll kind of be showing to you today as well. And so as we get into this today, I want to welcome you and, just tell you, settle in. We're going to interact quite a bit as well. I'd love for you to be able to share with each other. I think we learn well in community as well. So I just want you to be open, ask as many questions. We have all varying degrees of experience here in the room today. I'd love to draw on that as well. And so please feel free, ask any questions you want from any level, from any pace. We'll try to do the best we can. And if you can answer a question in the room, please feel free to answer a question in the room as well. So before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that today the land on which the University of Toronto operates, for thousands of years it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on the land. I do also want to add in, the work of the BRN and the IRN, which is the Indigenous Research Network. I think that the solidarity of the two as well at U of T is really important. So I do the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is not the work of indigenization. I work alongside with and support and advocate for Indigenous sovereignty and rights within the work that I do. But there's amazing Indigenous staff and scholars who do this work that I ensure that in the practice that I do to support that work. So a little bit of an agenda for today. We're going to go through some introductions. I want to get to know you a little bit as well and see where you are at. I like making it very relevant as well. So a lot of the, if I hear you're from certain fields or certain areas, I can kind of speak to certain examples or certain anecdotes that I've come along. So I'd love to get to know you a little bit as well. Then we'll talk about the funding landscape in Canada. Give you sort of an idea and overall as well, sort of institutionally, but also externally, what there are. So I believe, Maria, you sent out an email to everyone? Perfect. So you would have received an email. I strongly encourage you to pull up that email. One of those attachments, it's a lot of attachments, I know. I'm just trying to sort of overload you with a lot of as much of information that I have that I can give to you. So you'll find a lot of attachments. There is one called the project planning tool, the research project planning tool. That you will use in a little bit shortly. It also has my slides, I believe. So there's a PDF of my slides there if you want to follow along with the slides as well. It's kind of all in there. But there's a lot of additional attachments that gives you sort of back some information on the funding landscape in Canada. I can't go into too much depth. That would be an entire session on its own. So I'm just going to kind of give you an overview. Feel free to check out the attachments that there are as well to access them. Hi.
Is the planning tool the research planner?
Yes, the research planner, yes. So you want to pull that up because what we're going to do is we're going to workshop that document later on. Yeah, and then we'll go over the research planning tool. I'll describe it to you a little bit, and then we'll workshop it. So we'll sit here and kind of discuss it a little bit. We can, I'll have you complete some of it as you can, and then we'll stop at the end and kind of talk about what that experience was like, kind of putting that kind of information in there, thinking about it, reflecting on your own research and where you are at in your work. So don't worry about all of the attachments. The only thing you want to open up from that I just sent, that Maria just sent you, is the research project planning tool, which is the thing that we're going to be working on a little bit later. So if you just want to kind of keep it sort of front of mind, that's great. So I want to start us in a good space too, because I want to acknowledge where we are at. I want to acknowledge who is in the room. And to, who I am speaking to today as well, because there are realities in this room that impacts the way I'm even giving you the information I'm giving you today, and even the purpose of why we are here today. So I want to acknowledge that here as well. I want to acknowledge this reality. I want to, I want to say I know it's not easy, and, you're in a colonial environment. This institution was not made with you in mind, right? It was made with white, cisgendered, heteronormative men in mind to sit and speak and, share knowledge and develop knowledge for the rest of society. It's only been in the past few decades that, women, racialized folks, people with disabilities, indigenous peoples, 2S LGBTQ+, have been included, and even topics on those communities have been included even as part of the research landscape and research environment. And so, it's been a long battle. I've watched it, like I've been in post-secondary academia for about 13 years now. So I saw it as a graduate student, and I've been in it as a research administrator for 7 years, almost going on 8 years now. I've seen it as a research administrator as well. I've been in those spaces. Research administration I'm going to be honest, it's a very white space. So the people supporting you on your research, it's a very white space. And it is a space that speaks of you in a very deficit way, right? And so I see it, so what you're experiencing sometimes, I see it, I've seen it, and I just want to acknowledge that here. But, we are where we are at. Like I said, we're trying, listen to so many of your research topics as well. You're here to dismantle, we're here to decolonize, and it's not going to be easy. Our executive director, EDI, Jody Glean, she oftentimes says, for me in this, in the work that we're doing of EDI, if it's not hard, you're not doing it right. Right? If it's not difficult, you're not doing it right. So you're going to come up against things as well. But if we can equip you with as much as you can to be able to be ready for those, to be able to present your work in a way that cannot be denied, that it's amazing and it's excellent and you're prepared and you deserve these grants, then that's what we're here to do here, right? Is to be able to really prepare you for that, because there is a lot coming. So I want to encourage you, what we do have is community. We have these kinds of spaces here. Black Research Network, the Indigenous Research Network, and I think U of T is really making a lot of efforts to be able to provide us with spaces like this, that we can learn, that we can also have opportunities and enter into networks that we know our colleagues are oftentimes in, that we aren't part of, right? And so this is where we find community. I want to encourage you as well, as people were introducing their research fields, different levels of spaces that they're at in different roles. If you hear someone is from your field, from your area, email them after this. Ask them for a coffee. Invite them to, just talk to you. Don't be shy to do that. This is what these spaces are for. Reach out to people, because we need these networks and we need to do this work in community. Here's the reality as well. We know there's research excellence in this room. Again, so many of your topics, so relevant, so critical to our society today. Right? It's work that should be funded. And so this is why we are here. I do want to bring into this space as well, if we can kind of, some of the aspects that I really like taking from both African and Indigenous, generational ways of knowing and being are two concepts that I think is also really critical to this work as you kind of go through it, right? To remember and to kind of hold on to. One of them, again, is something from South Africa, which is Ubuntu. I am because we are, right? Keeping that in mind that, as you are in the space that you get to be here, like I said, you're in a very colonial space. You're oftentimes one of only few. I see how we're enjoying being in this space together because we don't get much of this very often. But you are representative of a larger community, and I know that that burden is put on you sometimes. It's not fair always, and it's not easy, but this is the reality. But you are there as well because we all are. And so, take that, embrace that, and sit in it, but also carry it with you to do the best you can, not only for yourself and as you develop your research and you reach your success, but for those who come behind you, right? And for your community as well. And I love this concept of 7 generations that Indigenous peoples have, where they talk about you are the 4th generation. You are here because of 3 generations before you who have placed you here. But you also have a responsibility to 3 generations from here on out, that everything you do in this space that you find yourself right now will impact and influence 3 generations from now. So whatever you're leaving behind now, the work that you're doing, understand it will impact 3 generations from now. So what is it that you will leave behind there? So as we enter this space again here, going into funding landscapes a little bit more. So many of you may be familiar with sort of more or less what the funding landscape looks like, as a researcher here in Canada. So there's essentially 2 spaces of funding that you can apply for. If you're part of U of T, again, academic institutions, and outside of academic institutions, there's research institutes as well that are what we call funding eligible institutions, but oftentimes, it's the academic institution that you are affiliated to, which is how you can get your research funding. It's oftentimes how the government especially funnels the research funding money is to academic institutions, which is why communities can apply for grants or, yes, government grant funding oftentimes, but it's not oftentimes at the level of research itself because there's so much monitoring that has to happen when research happens. And so academic institutions have been placed with that responsibility, right? And so that's why, a lot of the funding models obviously align with an academic institution and happen within an academic institution, which is why an office like mine exists. So essentially in our offices at Vice President Research and Innovation, we have internal grant funding, an internal grant funding model where you can apply for grants that are U of T specific. So only U of T eligible researchers, postdocs, and trainees can apply for those, right? One of them is, for example, the U of T Knot funding, right? You may have heard of it. It's a really large funding. It happens every year. Super exciting. We have a Black stream that I think is being launched very soon for Black researchers. And then they've had, for the past 2 years, I believe, for Indigenous researchers specifically. So you can apply for those, and it's within your stream. It's for any area of research, so it doesn't have to be work done on or with Black communities in any way. You just have to self-identify as a Black researcher yourself or Indigenous researcher yourself. So that's kind of one of the streams that they have there. Then external funding. There's a couple of pockets there as well. So there's tri-agency funding, which is one that I'm gonna touch on, and you'll hear me talk about a lot. I'll talk to that in a second, but then there's obviously federal funding, which is again government funding, so that's sort of Canada-wide too, right? So tri-agency is also Canada-wide, federal is also Canada-wide, but federal funding is oftentimes programs, I'm gonna say like sort of the really high level, oftentimes individual level type funding programs. So if you've heard of the Canada Research Chairs, has everybody heard of the Canada Research Chairs? That's a federal grant funding program. And then of course there's provincial ones, so like Ontario federal funding is Ontario funding, provincial funding that you can access as well. Specifically to tri-agency. Now the tri-agency ones is the ones where, I kind of want you to kind of take a look at, and we'll go through some of these. But it's put into 3 buckets according to fields of research. So the first one is the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. Kind of speaks for itself, right? So anything within the natural sciences and engineering fields. Then you have SSHRC, and they go by acronyms. So NSERC is the first one, so Natural Sciences Engineering Research Council, or NSERC. So you'll hear people throw that around. SSHRC, which is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, again, speaks very much to the social sciences and humanities researchers that apply to those, and those programs are tailored to those fields of research. And then the Canadian Institute of Health Research, so CIHR. And again, too, this is health research. What's been interesting the past couple of years, though, is that because the tri-agencies are encouraging interdisciplinary work, sometimes researchers have not been sure which one we go into, which one does our research, which one are we applicable to. It's been very confusing. I can tell you, even the tri-agency has been trying to figure that one out as they've been sort of reviewing the applications and so on. It gets really tough. I've seen it get easier over the past few years, especially over the past, I'm going to say the past 3 or 4 years, where they've started to understand that, for example, health research can have an aspect of looking at Black communities. But it's health research. It's not social sciences, humanities research. It's health research, right? Or, you know, you could be looking at waterways and water structures in Indigenous communities, but it's not Indigenous work that should be, again, in the social sciences, humanities. You have aspects of it, or experts may be part of your team that, you know, provide you with that expertise, or, you know, you have partners or so, but it's in NSERC. And so this has been sort of a bit of a confusing space for people to kind of figure that out. But I did send you as well, like I said, there's a ton of attachments to what I sent you. Some of them are updates from, so as a research administrator, we have this organization called Canadian Association of Research Administrators, CARA, that we are part of. And we have an annual conference. And at our annual conference, so because we support researchers at the institutions, we get information directly from the tri-councils, from the federal programs, from their administrators who come and talk to us to give us guidance on how to guide researchers. And so at this conference, it's oftentimes like a week-long conference. We get all the updates. They give us kind of like hints and tips. And when you're applying for this, like this program is really looking for this. So we kind of get a bit of the secret sauce there oftentimes. I've attached a number of slides there from this past conference that I'm sharing with you that are from those federal programs, so from the tri-agency programs. Look through it, figure out which one belongs to you. It's great. They give you descriptions too of if your research is this is what you can apply for. This is the amount of funding for this program. These are deadlines for these programs. So it gives you a lot of information too, so that you don't have to go through their website and figure out from the 50 opportunities. I know it can be very overwhelming to go through the individual websites for the tri-agencies. So I've shared with you those slides there that will kind of help you and help you navigate a little bit more, give it to you in a sort of like a more comprehensive and understanding way as well. So this is essentially what the funding landscape looks like. Oftentimes when you are starting out your career, you want to start with things like internal grant funding. Many of you might even have that sort of seed funding, right? A little $5,000 here, a little $15,000 here. Maybe it can go up to $25,000. I know, I think too, with the Indigenous research stream, theirs was something like $25,000, but I think that the Black research stream is going up to about $50,000 if I'm not mistaken. So it can get really big. It can be very helpful to researchers, especially who identify in this way and who maybe have not been successful for some of the other bigger grants. So it can get you started, sort of get you connected, give you money to start your partnership that you need to start with, or, you know, start with your community engagement to develop some of the tools that you need to start with to be able to really get your research program going, to be able to apply for those bigger ones, right? So internal grant funding and the small little seed fundings are really great ways to kind of start things off, right? But you do want to start thinking about the bigger picture as well. You want to dream. I want to encourage you to dream. I want you to think about that $25 million a year grant that you could apply for, right? I want you to think about those kinds of things, right? Because if you don't start with the end in mind, you may never reach that end. And so, you know, planning out your research program in a way that is aspirational, again, you can always change it as you go, or, you know, pivot if you need to. but you don't always have a path if you don't have it written down. And so this is really the purpose for what I'm trying to do today, is to encourage you to think about, you might be a master's student right now. You might be thinking, this is like, it's not way beyond you. You can start now with the projects, even the ideas and the concepts that you even have. You can put it down to paper. It's not going to hurt anybody for you to write down your dreams, right? This is what we're here to do now as well. So just to sort of introduce to you the, the landscape here, what it kind of looks like. This is an example too of how one of those tri-agency grants also starts small and kind of goes bigger. So they have different sort of areas that they're looking at. So this is specific to SSHRC. So this is social sciences, humanities researchers. NSERC looks very similar. CIHR also looks very similar. I'm just putting the SSHRC one up here because it's on one of the slides that they had provided to us. But the way that they've sort of split it up is they're looking for investing in talent, investing into sort of insights, so new innovation, new ideas, and into connection. How are you connecting communities? How are we outside of academia connecting with the real world, right? And so these are the kinds of areas that NSERC's objectives might be a little bit different. Again, CIHR, theirs might be a little bit different as well. But these are the types of grants as well as you see underneath those that you can get. So, master's scholarships, they've got doctoral scholarships, postdoc fellowships as well under talent, right? That's how they're investing into talent. Insight grants, so they have insight development grants, insight grants, they support institutions. So sometimes institutions will get a bucket of money that they then can just distribute to their researchers through an internal program. So they will also do that in that way. And then connection grants, like I said, connection grants is one where you're starting your partnerships, you're starting to work to figure out who your partners are, you need to meet with people, so they understand that. So for that process as well, you have very specific grants to that. Again, these grants are very much tiered. So the partnership grant suite, I really like this one. I've worked quite a bit with this one too, so that's why we'll definitely be talking soon, I love the way that they've sort of put it out, because you can start with a partnership engage grant, and just sort of get engaged with your partners. You're figuring out your relationship. You may not even have figured out your research question, right? Per se. You may not have figured out all your projects yet, but you're figuring that part out. And so they give you money to figure stuff out, to figure out your program as well. Then you go to the partnership development grants. Now you know who your partners are, but now you need to spend time with them. You maybe need to do workshops together. You need to go and visit them. You need to collect data to inform what a bigger project will be. Then there's partnership grants, which is actually the next tier. So those aren't so much in order, but anyway, the way that goes is partnership grants. Partnership grants, these are multi-million-dollar grants. So these are also for, I think the partnership grants are 7 years, I believe, or so 5 to 7 years, but they're multi-million-dollar annual grants. And so these are really big projects where you're working with a community, you're developing something for the community as well that will also lead to, 25 publications from it and have so many outputs and, really impact policy or procedures within, Canada or globally or at the UN or something like that, right? So those are really sort of like the big ones. But thinking about as well how you're going to start that off and the potential of what your research question could be and then lead to that larger impact is a very good way to start. Here's the reality too. There is lots of opportunity right now. You're probably seeing it everywhere. Institutions have been going more recently through cluster hires and things like that of Black and Indigenous faculty and so on. But the funding agencies are also wanting to be able to provide funding for topics that impact Black and Indigenous communities, topics on EDI embedded within the work that you do, so equity, diversity, and inclusion that you do as well. Because they understand that they've not done that before. They've disregarded, they've excluded, and in inequitable ways have not funded, subjects and topics like this. And, over the pandemic, we really saw the hit that Canada took, that the world took, when we don't consider our most marginalized or those who are underrepresented in our environment. And so I think the Canadian government is really wanting to invest more and make this part of what they're doing. Awesome. So like I said, this tool is really, it's a knowledge exchange canvas that that was created by folks at Western University while I was still working there as a research development officer, by Miriam Hayward and Aaron Huner. It's really a phenomenal tool for researchers to use to start to plan out what you're doing. So if you're doing a project or anything like that, or you're just planning out your research, this is a great thing to take with you. So for those who are planning on, if you're doing a PG, this is an amazing thing to sit with, because partnership grants will have so much knowledge mobilization requirements. So this tool is really great. Today, I'm not going to concentrate on the bottom piece, which is the knowledge exchange and knowledge stewardship plan. That kind of goes a little bit beyond, but we're going to talk about this top part over here, because you do need to plan this bottom part out. I strongly encourage you to go back, as well, after this session to take that and take a look at what those questions are. But we're going to work through this top part today so that you can start to really think about your project scope. So the reality is, too, you do have to build your research team, right? Especially if you're planning on applying for a larger grant, you need people. You need people, and I'm going to tell you this as well because we're in this space. You need people because people are also power. And you need to leverage their power that they hold, so their names, their influence, and if you can find white allies who are like really, highly funded, things like that, use them, because they use us now these days as well to add us to their grants, and then we do so much labor. So, I'm just going to put that there. So you do need to leverage power in this way in your research team. You need to find folks in your field and in your area who are willing to work with you. Make sure you clearly articulate your expectations as well. Because if you are going to be doing the majority of the work, you should be getting the majority of the credit, right? So if you are asking them to be part of your research team, do not let them take over. Do not let them be first author, lead PI, blah, 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 blah. Make sure you're leveraging in a way that will benefit you, okay? Especially if it's your research idea, your research program. You do, and that's why I'm saying, find allies, find folks that they understand how hard it is, as well, especially for early career researchers, but also for underrepresented groups in these spaces to be able to get this. And so, many of them are willing to actually play that role for you, to say, I will let you leverage my name to be able to, get this grant. I'll support you with it. I'll guide you with it. I'll mentor you in this way. But you do need those folks. So I strongly encourage you now already. Start now. If you're a postdoc, a PhD, if there's an expert in your field who is at UCLA, email them. Say, hey, can I get a coffee with you in the next couple weeks? I'm wondering if I could just get 30 minutes with you just to kind of talk about your work, my field. I'm a student, I'm a trainee. I'm really interested in your field and in your area. And I really just want to be able to talk to you and ask you a couple questions. Also prepare questions beforehand, go prepared with those kinds of meetings as well. Okay, so this tool can be applied both to a research project, so one project, or your research program. So I want you to think about it from that scope as well, right? Because more than likely, if you're developing a research program, all of your projects will be related. You'll probably have very similar partners across the different projects. Maybe some of them will be different, but for the most part, you'll be in the same field and same area, right? So as part of this, thinking about your project scope, the first thing you want to think about, who are your partners? So don't start with your research question. As you can see here in this tool, the research question is what? Way at the end. Don't start with your research question. Who are your partners? Who are you working with? U of T is one of them, first of all, because you're thinking about yourself as an entity, right? Your institution is a partner to you. They've employed you. They will have the services and supports that they will be providing to you as part of your project. So U of T is one of them. You might have a community partner. You might have an industry partner, right? If you're working sort of in STEM fields. Who is that industry partner? Who out there will be able to, or does work that is similar to the work that you do that's not in an academic institution? That's kind of how you got to think about it for partners. Then end users, because your partners may not be your same end users. So maybe you're partnering with community, and community is your end user, but maybe your end user for what you're actually trying to develop are the community leaders, so more like politicians, right? Or if you're working in a hospital setting, maybe your end users are actually physicians, because you're creating something that physicians are going to use to provide better care for racialized patients, right? So thinking about who your partners are, write them all down. Also, who your potential good partners are. Are you aware of who, in your field, and who, depending on your research project and themes, actually connects to the work that you're doing? Write those down. Then, like I said, end users as well. The next thing you want to talk about the type of partner they are. So are they an industry partner? Are they an academic institution? Maybe you're working with 3 or 4 academic institutions. Maybe you're working with school boards, right? And maybe it's like 3 or 4 different school boards that you're working with, right? So what is the type of partner, and what is their role? What are they contributing? What is their part in it? Are they providing you with expertise? Do you need their facilities to do your research? What is it that their role is? Same thing for end users as you're going through this as well. What is the end user type? Are they a patient? Are they students? Are they teachers? Are they mechanical engineers? Are they chemists, in industry? Are they, pharmaceutical companies? Who are your end users as well? And what is their role in your research? Then, actually, I want to show you this. This is sort of like a little bit of a mini diagram that I've kind of, hi, yes?
Sorry, can you give an example? Because when you say the end user type, that makes sense. But then the end user role,
yes.
Can you give an example?
So the end user role as part of your project. So do they have a role in your project? So for example, do you have a community advisory? Okay. Right? Like say you're doing it in a hospital, you've got a patient advisory group, right? So your end users are patient. Okay, let's put it this way. Say you're doing diabetes as part of your, looking at type 1 diabetes, so juvenile diabetes, right? Or type 1 diabetes. So your end users are really going to be, say you're developing something that the kids have to use as part of their treatment, right? So the end users are really the kids and their parents, right? Your end user type, so kids and parents, right? But with the end users, you're being specific. So kids at sick kids that you're going to be, where you're going to get your population from. Their role, what is their role going to be in your project? So the parents will be participating in it. The kids will try out the device, or, that's sort of their role. They will be part of the study and be, using whatever it is, So, good stuff. Great questions. Great questions. So this is kind of a diagram of what I've kind of drawn out for you to think about it. So NSE is natural sciences engineering, and then health sciences. I didn't draw a sort of like a social sciences humanities one here, because that can be very different. You could be an archival person, like you could be in history, right? You could be sitting like you're doing archival work, and it could look very different, right? You may not have co-PIs, it's just yourself and your graduate student, right? And so that may look a little different. But for those who are sort of in natural sciences engineering and health sciences, this is how you need to really think about it as well. Who are your co-PIs that you're going to be working with? Alongside that, who are your partners, right? And then from that, who are your HQP? So HQP are highly qualified, say again? Personnel, that's the word, thank you. I haven't been in NSERC spaces in a while. So yes, highly qualified personnel. So it's a term that's more used sort of in the NSERC and CIHR worlds as well. So this is basically trainees. What it's saying is that those are the folks that are like your master's student, your PhD students, your postdocs as well. So you want to list that out, how many you will need that supports each, or if you have co-PIs, do they have trainees as well? Because you need to count them as part of your project as well, because they will probably be contributing to your project or your research program as well in this way if you're partnering with them as well. And then, I just put on there sort of knowledge user of what that looks like, just keeping your knowledge user in mind. Does that make sense? Good stuff. Okay, now you develop your research question. Because now you have your partners, now you have what it's gonna you have the expertise of who you want to work with, who could potentially be. Now you may have started with I call it like a hypothetical research question that you obviously did start with, that started that out, but now you want to really formulate and rethink your research question. Don't stick with the same research question you started before you got your partners because you want to develop your research question with your partners, with your co-PIs, and with the expertise that you now have in your room that's going to influence that work. I think this is something, unfortunately, that a lot of researchers get stuck on, is that I want to answer this research question. And I'd be damned if anybody else who I ask to work with me wants to change that, and then I'm not flexible, and then guess what? You try to apply for a grant, and the grant tells you, you don't have the expertise, or this was not well presented, or this does not look very collaborative, and so we're not funding you. So you want to be able to show as well that you have co-created your research question with your partners, end users, and your research team in mind, and the expertise that you've put together there. And this is how you're going to be able to carry out your research, because you need to show feasibility. Having a research question that encompasses all of that shows feasibility, demonstrates feasibility as well. And then obviously you want to be able to also show the benefits, write down what the benefits are to your partners for being part of your research program, right? What are the benefits to your end users for wanting to be part of your research program? You know, kids with diabetes will be able to, not have to take insulin, 3-4 times a day. They'll only have to do it once a day, something like that. I have a kid with type 1 diabetes. Sorry, it's in my head too. So, just kind of thinking about that in that way. And then 2, what is the benefit to your research field? That's a big one. You need to stay relevant. It is so important that your research stays relevant. Researchers, I always tell people to, like, researchers don't get into their work necessarily for the money. I know you don't. You get into it for the passion, because you love, you're passionate about the topic. But don't lose sight of where your topic fits into the larger scale of your field as well. And I think that's what's happening a lot now too in a lot of humanities and social sciences too, is a lot of, I actually think like a lot of departments like that are struggling because they're researchers who have been there, who are close to retirement. Their research itself has become very irrelevant, but they're still hanging on. And they're not willing to be flexible and change and, kind of include these different frameworks and ways of thinking into their work. And then they can't understand why they can't get a grant, and they can't understand why, So make sure your work is relevant to your field. Key project goals. So this is going to be one of the last ones that I kind of touch on here. And again, apologize, I see the timing. But key project goals, this is where you really write out your research plan. This is where you make it all happen. And I have this diagram here that kind of shows the way that you can think of what is your overall project goal. So you need to sort of map this out in this way. What is your overall project goal? What is your big research question you're going to answer? I'm going to find a cure for type 1 diabetes. That's my overall project goal, right? Then how are you going to do that? You're going to have a couple of short-term goals, right? How are you going to, you're going to do a literature review on, or you're going to find out what the literature says on type 1 diabetes right now. You're going to figure out what the experiences are of parents and students with type 1 diabetes. You are going to find out what physicians' experiences are in caring for kids with type 1 diabetes, right? So these are all your short-term goals, right? So now, from the short-term goals, you're going to develop Project A. Project A is a literature review. Project B and Project C are one clinical trial and one qualitative research project that you're going to speak to people, and one where you'll do a survey or you'll do a clinical trial. For your short-term Project D, you'll maybe go to the physicians' organization and do a survey with them on, to get information from physicians on how they, their experiences of working with parents and kids with type 1 diabetes, right? Yeah.
Sorry, if you were to think of a time point,
yes.
Like the short term,
yes.
Will that be like 1 year, 2 years? What would
Exactly. So pretty much this right here could be a 5 to 10 year plan. It could also be a 3 to 10 year plan, right? It depends on your work. Now I know that social sciences and humanities, it can take a lot, it can take up to 10 years for you to really develop all of this, right? It could take a long time for you to get to applying for a PG. Can I ask you how long you've been in your career, and because you're applying for, is this your first PG that you're thinking of now?
Yes, and I'm not the PI.
Okay.
But I'm a collaborator, been on the partnership development. But Yeah, I did my PhD from 2010 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And then the partnership development grant was supposed to be 2018 to 21, but was extended because of the pandemic. And we've been putting off applying for the partnership grant until this year, and even down to the wire this year because the deadlines are now approaching. So yeah, it's been,
Since you graduated your PhD.
yeah, for the
So what's that?
partnership grant, 2016. So 6
years, right?
Yeah.
And so the goal is as well for you to eventually get your own partnership grant, right?
Exactly.
As a lead PI,
Yeah.
right?
And
So you're doing one now. So this is what I'm talking about here, the long-term goal. So you've been 6 years since graduating your PhD. So think about it like that. That's how long your goals have to be out from, right? That's how long it actually takes to get to that. PG is how much million is?
What is it? I think it's 250 million.
250.
A year? Is it a year?
No, it's 250 million for the
5 to 7 years.
years, yeah. So it's 50 million for 55 million, something like.
But I'll say that
Yeah.
the research, I had a short doctoral fellowship in which I got 3 years into my PhD. After, I had an OGS, I was shortlisted for the short doctoral. After second year, third year got the doctoral fellowship. But the research that got me the doctoral fellowship is continued in the partnership development.
Nice.
So I think that's something,
It's great.
yeah, to keep in mind this in terms of the grants you're writing, even while a PhD student.
Yeah.
And going to the grant writing workshop,
Yes, I can't emphasize that.
Game changer.
Oh, folks.
game changer to go
Yeah.
and sit, and it feels futile. You're in a room with 400 people, but then if you go and you sign in to the workshop, you can get a one-to-one meeting, and it changed the course of my research and success in funding.
So key. That's the other thing I was going to say as well towards the end. Some of the other resources is grant writing workshops. Don't ignore, the research alerts you get, all of those things that you get from U of T as well. Those workshops, go to them, especially when it comes to grant writing and aspects of, that might be applicable to your projects too. Go and attend them. Yeah. So as you can see here, this is sort of what it will look like. And so you'll have those and you need to write all of these out. Even if a lot of them are blanks right now, even if you're going to start and the only thing you have is the first box there is the overall project goal, right? And you're maybe writing down just your partners, and you should know who your end users are, right? Like whose problems are you solving in the world, right? You should know more or less those others. Start with that, write it down. Because if I can tell you, this information right here is one of those $250 million grants. This right here is that. This is how I work with researchers to write and respond in that grant, is they have to have all of these aspects included in that grant. And so if you are ready, you have everything kind of laid out, by the time you want to apply for that grant, you're ready to go. You don't have to, I remember I actually got a Canada Research Chairs application. Phenomenal researcher. She had no idea what her research program was supposed to be like. A Canada Research Chair, basically what it is the government pays your salary, right? So it tells your institution, this person is such an amazing researcher, we're going to pay their salary, your institution doesn't have to pay it. You can relinquish them from their courses that they have to teach, and they can just do research, and you can actually invest money into just their research and research program. So this person kind of gets just to do research. So they get it for like 7 years. I think that was for 7 years. I sat with her application, like a first draft of her application, and I was like, she's got no idea where her research is going over the next 7 years. And she's about to apply for a grant for 7 years. And so I had to sit with her and say, tell me your story. What world problem do you want to solve? What do you want to do? And from that, I had to pull things from her to literally put into this. She got a Canada Research Chair now. She is a Canada Research Chair. We were successful. But it took a lot of work because she was not prepared for that application. She was passionate about the work. She's amazing. She deserved that Canada Research Chair. She absolutely did. But she was not prepared to write that application, right? And so for me as a research officer, not everyone has a research officer at their disposal like I was. This was before I came to U of T. was at Western, but you know, not everyone has that. So be ready to do that for yourself. Be ready when you get nominated to be a Canada Research Chair. Here you go. This is what I'm going to be doing for the next 7 years, and why the government should be paying for my salary, my $250,000 a year salary, and then add a little. Anyway, just a little bit of a dream, right? So be ready for it. So I'm not going to go through, again, because we're really so sorry, Maria, too. We're right at 11:03. I want to leave time for questions. So I'm just going to kind of like tell you, again, you'll get my slides. It has titles to it. So the rest is about impact, right? So writing out your research, your project output. So what specifically are your outputs for your projects and for your research, and what are your project outcomes, right? So what is the impact, like what are the outcomes going to be? How's it going to impact society? How's it going to impact the world? How is it going to impact your field in that way? And then training, thinking about your training program. Also, a lot of these Tri-Council grants now have EDI requirements. So everything that I've just told you about as well, think about how EDI goes into each part of this. So who's your partners? Are you thinking about it equitably? Is there representation within your partners from underrepresented groups? Your end users, how diverse are your end users? Are you thinking about that as well? In every part of this, think about how EDI, issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion impacts all of them. Then you will also fulfill the Tri-Council requirements in that way that you can kind of write into your grant too. Again, governance structure, like I said, I have a number of slides on that. I'm not going to go through any of these, but this is also really important. The last part of it is the knowledge exchange and your goals and activities and how they translate to that. There's some great examples of what it would look like. This is for different fields and different areas. So these are the kinds of things as well you'll write into your program. What do you want to, what's your legacy? You know, what is your legacy that you're leaving behind that your research is going to kind of leave behind even after you're gone, right? Anyway, I kind of did that. So again, just a couple last tips leaving you. I'm so sorry we didn't get to the practical part. You can go do that with the tool that I've given you. You'll be able to do it. But, you know, just again, a couple of tips for grant writing. Make sure you have all of the expertise you need on your team to carry out the research, right? Make sure that you're pulling in from folks that you really need that can show that you've thought through these aspects of your project. Stick to the program guidelines. Use it as your checklist. Have it right next to you as you're writing. Write according to, you know what I used to do actually at my previous job too, to help my researchers, I would take the program guidelines, and I would create a whole Word document on it, and I would take the headings, how long each is, put it into a Word document for them and say, start writing on this. So don't start outside, start writing on this. Because it gives them, and without the noise of all of the guidelines, add this, it gives them the basic of what they need. And then sometimes I'll even add comments as to when you're looking at this section, just make sure you're thinking about this, that of it as well. So, you know, again, you might not have a research officer with you who does this, but do it for yourself as well. You know, start with the template of your own, of the grant that you're having to write. Again, make sure your research focus aligns with the purpose of the grant. So use keywords from the grant, use suggested frameworks and formats. Sometimes they'll give you the framework as well to kind of use. Budget time to complete the grant. Whew, big one. Don't write this and then it's due, like write this in 2 days and then it's due in another day. Take time with it. You know, rather wait another year before you apply for the same grant than putting in something that's not good. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm going to leave you with as well. But are there any questions? Hi.
So I know a lot of this gets really detailed and granular,
yes.
But in terms of like the project scope, would this be applicable for developing a research program for an assistant professorship application?
Yes. Oh, if you have this written down and if you can make it nice and concise and kind of even show it in diagrams of how you've really thought through your research program, oh my gosh. You can show your partners, and if you already have partners too, that you can list there and say, this is the partners, these are the potential partners, these are the partners at U of T, because this is the expertise that we have at U of T that I can collaborate with faculty members here. So I'm actually telling you how to write a Canada Research Chairs application right now, because it kind of aligns with I think that application too. But that's literally what you want to show. You want to show your value to the field. You want to show your value to the institution. You want to show how you can work with those at your institution and how you can impact your field at U of T because of the partnerships you have, because of the knowledge you have, because of your skills and your expertise that you're bringing into the institution that will benefit U of T, because you're so amazing. You're so awesome. Yeah, good stuff.
Good questions. Any last questions? Hey.
On that question, then would it be advisable to first reach out to the potential collaborators before you can submit that grant to say, this is what I'm working on, would you be interested or working with me on this and all that? Or do you just highlight it in the proposal that we have this expertise here and this is what I hope to do with all of this at my disposal?
Yeah, so it depends. So what I can say is you can say, because there's two parts to that. So if they will be crucial to your project, definitely you need to reach out to them to get confirmation and their support for the application. But if you are just applying, so this is where this application comes into, because it's for a position, so it's for an associate professor position, right? You don't have to say, I'm already partner. You can say, I'm already partnering with this, and these are my potential partners because of the expertise we have at U of T. So you need to just be clear with that, not, you know what I mean? Like not saying you're working with people when you're not working with them. Be clear in it. That's to say that I have not spoken to these individuals, but the amazing potential expertise that I could work with includes these individuals here. So.
Might be a bit specific, but so there's literally nobody doing what I'm going to do. Someone did it 20 years ago and it hasn't been touched since then. It's important to get something done again. The person who did it, she's like 80 and retired.
Yeah.
So in terms of a collaborator, I would love to have a bigger name on there, but there literally is no bigger name to add.
Oh, there you go. Interdisciplinary.
Think about another field outside of your own, but that is related, or maybe someone who's done work in their field on a similar topic to what you're taking on in your field, and how you could even learn from their frameworks and what they've maybe used to then support the work that you're doing or guide the work that you're doing, but you're just going to kind of make it what it is.
But the people who do my research just aren't in North America.
Oh, in North America at all? Yeah. Then go globally. Yeah, then do that. Oh my gosh. U of T loves global partnerships. They love it. So do the tri-councils as well, right? And especially if your work is going to have global impact, like that's actually a necessity. So, no, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Oh, we got one more. Yes.
Pointing us in the direction of like the grant writing workshops, because I feel like I have them in my calendar and I'm like, oh, too busy.
Yes, I know. So there's something called research alerts. Oh, actually, also CRIS. So CRIS .utoronto.ca. CRIS. They're the Center for Research Innovation Supports, right? Oh my gosh, videos, tools. They do the work. They oftentimes host a lot of the workshops, the grant writing workshops. They'll do like SHRC workshops. They'll do NSERC workshops. They'll do CIHR workshops that are specific to your field, your area. Any grants that are coming up, they'll do specific to that grant too. Put yourself on alert with them. Like sign up for them. Yeah. CRIS. Yes. CRIS.utoronto.ca.
And this, if you just search right now, School of Graduate Studies workshops, UT, the grant writing workshops will come out there.
Perfect. Got it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much for today. Really appreciated it. Thanks. And good luck. Good luck.